9:40. A little bit of an early mark, not by much. Today in court, we heard the rest of Simon Patterson's testimony, his evidence, and that ran for about just until about lunch or just before. And it was quite a long lunch break today. I had about almost 2 hour lunch break today. I'm not sure why. That seems to be what happened today. It must have had something else going on. I have no idea. But in the afternoon, we heard from 3 other witnesses, and those particular witnesses were all revolving around a Facebook group originally for Kelly Lane, the Kelly Lane documentary and trial. Now, these 3 people gave their testimony this afternoon, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about tonight. That's what I'm going to run you through. I think a lot has been said about what Simon said this morning already, and I think it's better if we talk about the stuff that happened this afternoon. So let me get my stuff all set up. Hey, how are you all? Good to see you. Hope you're having a great Sunday out there, or if you're in Australia, it's a Monday. Hope you're having a great time out there. Let me see. Okay. All right. So let me get you up one of these sketches, because the sketch artists are doing real work. They're doing must take a lot of effort to make trial sketches. I think so anyway. I don't have that type of skill in my life. Ping does not have that type of skill. I don't have that skill. Ping is not an artist at all. Great to see you all. Great to see you. Let's see. Hey, Pain or Chocolate. Good to see you. Aussie Taz says, one of my biggest nightmares if one of my true crime friends ended up in a trial. Well, I think I've seen not this particular case, not anything to do with Erin Patterson. I've seen several cases where people that were friends or acquaintances, or I don't know, they knew each other somehow and they've been called to give evidence on something. It happens more than you think. And these online groups, they're part of people's lives now. So they're sort of integral into understanding certain things. And that's probably why these people, I don't know, but maybe that's why they had to testify. I have no idea. But yeah, there's a black and white of that sketch that has been around for about a week now. It's a good sketch by that artist. They did a good job. All right. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into it. So today's day 5. Day 5 of the Erin Patterson trial. No, that sounds a bit weird, but it's because we started on Tuesday last week and not Monday. So today's actually day 5. All right, let me get to my notes here. So I actually reached out to someone for some advice, and I couldn't get in touch with them. So we're going to just call these people by initials. I think that's okay. Hold on. Let me get down to my notes. The notes are pretty long today. We had a long day today. Where are we? Okay. All right. So the first witness in the afternoon is a lady, and I'm going to use the initials CH. And they ask her, "Do you know Erin Patterson?" She says, "Yeah, I know her. Yeah, I do." And they said, "How do you know Erin?" And they say, and she says, "Approximately around 6 years ago, I was a member of an online Facebook chat group. It was a true crime group focused on Kelly Lane, and I met her through that." And they go on to say that, Facebook is a social media platform, and they say that's correct, which you can access from a phone, computer, or a tablet. And, I think we all understand that that's what Facebook is. And they say each user makes their own profile and selects a photo. And they said that's correct. And they said, here, one of the questions today was, can you explain what you mean by a group? And it says here, how does a Facebook group get created? Now, they were saying, and the reply was from CH, a Facebook group gets created by individuals and they're on all different topics. Many of us are probably on Facebook groups from our local community. So, like a community group, like, if you live in a certain area and they have like buy, sell, swap in your local community, something like that probably is what she's trying to describe. She goes on to say, this one was a Facebook group with a focus on the Kelly Lane trial. The first group was a really large group of approximately around 2,000 people. And they follow this up with another question, and they say, which included yourself and Erin Patterson. And they said, that is correct, or that's correct. Hold on, let me get you who's asking these questions so I can attribute this correctly. Hold on. So this is Miss Lenthal. So Miss Lenthal is asking the questions this time, and here we go. And it says here, this is for the prosecution. They're saying here, how many people were in the group? They say a group of approximately 2,000. They said the first group, and we'll get to this in a minute, first group was around 2,000 people. And they go later in this testimony to explain that these groups sort of splintered off, and they had one that was 2,000, one that had like 25 people in it, like a smaller group, and then eventually they had a group chat that had approximately about 5 people in it, so like more like a private group messenger, and we will get to that in a minute. And they ask her, this included yourself and Erin Patterson, and she says that's correct. And they ask now, over time, did that group change in terms of the number of people? And CH replies, yes, that group had a lot of. She says being a large group. It was around 2,000 people or so were interested in that trial. There was a lot of disagreement and disharmony in that group. So, and she goes on. They go on to say and ask. So eventually, that was turned into a smaller group of around 20 to 30 people. Is that correct? And she replies, yes, that's correct. How they said, being in a Facebook group, how does that allow you to communicate with other members of that group? And they were saying, and she replies, there's a number of ways people communicate, mostly as a large group, 20 or 30 people conversing, just chatting. Sometimes there was also direct conversation one-on-one through messages, and also there were some conversations that happened outside of Facebook through, direct message through your phone. And they say they ask her what her profile name was. I'm just going to go with CH, and then it says here, and what was Erin Patterson's profile name? And she replies, in the beginning, it was Erin Patterson. They ask after this, did it then change over time to Erin? And she goes on to say, that's correct. It did change to Erin. And then they said, and then following that, did it change to the name Erin? And she says that's correct as well. So all those three names were ones that she saw associated with Erin Patterson in that group. And they go on to ask, in that smaller group of people, of 20 to 30 people, what sort of post did people share in that group? What was the nature of the group? And she says it was mostly centered around current affairs and what was happening in the world. A lot of discussion around royalty, politics, crime, and some personal stories. And she follows on with that saying, so we got to know each other. It was a small enough group where we did lean into each other's lives and we were a support for each other. So it sounds like some of the people got, more friendly with each other throughout their time in the group. And they follow on that question with, what sort of post did Erin Patterson share? And she replies, just lots about her kids, Lego, and so I'll explain something here. I've had a couple of people reach out saying, you're not saying the town names right. So I hope I'm going to pronounce it right this time. And if I get it wrong, well, I'm sorry. Apparently, I can't pronounce it. So I'll redo that one. It says, "What sort of post did Erin Patterson share?" And it says, "Lots about her kids, Lego, and buying the house at Leongatha." So I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably getting it wrong. I'm gonna get messages in like 2 minutes. And then she goes on to say, just general life type stuff, information about herself, her husband, and the challenges she was facing, and the difficulties she had as a single mom. And they say, okay, next question. Now in the group, what was her reputation in terms of how she contributed to that group? And CH says, she was well regarded. She was a really good researcher. So, so in the group, in earlier times when we would, really be focused on true crime, she was well known to be able to research and get information quickly from the internet. And they go on to say here, she was a bit of a super sleuth in that group, and there were a lot of professional people in that group. So she was highly regarded in that group. They go on to say, was that group of 20 to 30 people eventually shut down? And she said, yes, it was. And they ask, was that around the time at the end of 2019? And she says, correct. They said, did you remain in contact with Erin Patterson after the delusion of that group? And she says, yeah, I did. I, She said there was another group established and I was not in that group because I didn't want to. I just wanted to opt out at that time in my life. I had other things to focus on. And about 10 months after, Erin contacted me personally to invite me back to the group, which was even smaller at that time. And they're asking like how many members were in that group at that time. And they're giving a number of like 7 or 8. And she says, yeah, that's correct. And she says maybe up to maybe about 15. You know, 7, 8 to 15, it varied at the time. And they say, what was the focus of this new smaller group? And her reply to that question is very similar to the previous one. It was very much people who had bonded over the course of those years and had provided that level of personal relationship, as well as, a current affairs. So they're looking at like things happening in the world, things, you would see probably on, a current affairs. And they said things that were happening in the world were discussed. So it was sort of like just a news and updates type thing. Hey guys, good to see you. That's how someone told me today. I'm not going to name that. Are you the person who emailed me? Someone told me it was, yeah, you say it like like Leon, but Leon, but with an N with no M, right? Instead, it's like Leon with an N instead of an M. Leon Gather. So there we go. We got one right. Let's see if we can get the second one right, which is, I'll do it when it comes up. I got it in my head. I know it's like Kookaburra at the end, Barra. Or yeah, not the other way. I got it in my head, I know. All right, let's continue. So they're talking about these Facebook groups that Erin was a part of, and they're asking about how many members, how many people were there, what did you guys talk about, and they're talking about the different sizes of the group. How did that change over time? And that's the answers that they're giving. Started off as a really big group, around 2,000 people. Got to a smaller group. I think it's around 20 to 25 people, and then they fractured off into an even smaller group of around five or so people in like a private message type thing. We'll get to that though. Uh, like Curran Downs? Okay. Curran Borough. Curran Borough? Alright, I don't know. We'll see. Hey, Jess T, how are you? Hey, guys. I gotta stop clicking these freaking things. Guys, we can't say stuff like that. You'll get me arrested, literally. Please, please keep those type of comments to yourself. You'll literally get me arrested. And then I'll have to go back and edit everything afterwards, and don't make Ping's night longer than it has to be. We can talk about whatever you want in about 5 weeks' time. In 5 weeks' time, you can say whatever you want. Right now, can't say stuff like that. I'll have to go back and like literally blur it later. It's a pain in the bum. All right, let's continue. I want to tell you about this because I think this was um, something to report. And they ask CH here, how would you describe your relationship with Erin Patterson, or how you perceived it to be in terms of closeness? And she replied, I always felt I'd had a good relationship with Erin. She says, I had about 4 or 5 conversations on the phone with her at different times over the years, one on one, and was a listening ear for her at times. I didn't have any problems with Erin at the time. They follow this up with another question. Have you ever met her in person? And she said, well, no, I haven't. No, I have not. And they said, you mentioned before about her being a single mother. And she says, yes. And they said, during that time, you knew Erin. Did you ever discuss or post information about her relationship with her husband, Simon? No. Did she ever discuss or post information about her relationship with her husband, who is Simon Patterson? And she says, yes. And they say, all right, what did you understand? It was their nature of the relationship to be from what she had posted. And she replied, CH replies, I understood they sort of grown apart. They had gone in different directions. I understood that she was self sufficient, although she had concerns about him paying his share. And she says, um, how I'd put it is that he was very controlling. She used the word coercive at times, and that his family was very demanding, and she felt challenged by their demands, and particularly around the kids attending some sort of education. So I'm not going to go into that. I don't really care about the kid part of it. Um, yeah, I'm just going to skip that bit. I just don't want anything to do with the kid part of any of this trial. They said, how did she paint Simon in terms of being a father, or as how did she paint Simon in terms of as a father? Again, the terms of coercive and abusive, that kind of coercive control was the sense we had been given. Disagreed with her lots, in particular around some things to do with the kids, uh, things like medical. She says one of the kids was not very well. That's all I'm going to say about that one. Let's follow. Let's go to the next question, and let's keep going. They go on to follow and ask CH about did Erin ever post or write write anything about Simon's religion and its impact on their relationship. So Erin and Simon's relationship, and she replies and answers this question. Yes, she did. And they say, What did she say? That's the question. What did she say? Question mark. Just that she being an atheist and Simon being from a strong Baptist background, she found that very challenging, and that is what she shared with us. She found that challenging, in particular, the decisions around things like divorce, separation, how kids should be brought up and educated. She found all of that very controlling and demanding. And they said here, now at some stage you became aware that Erin Patterson had family members that passed away. So that's the next question. And she says, yeah. And you've never spoken to they're asking her, have you ever talked to Erin about that? And the question's phrased like this. And you've never spoken to Erin Patterson about anything anything relating to that. Is that the case? And she replies, I was on a group call, but I didn't speak to Erin directly. No. She was on that call, but I did not speak with her. So she's saying there was some sort of group call. She was participating in that group call, but never actually spoke to Erin directly. So following this is the questions from the prosecution. Following that, with the same witness, CH, it becomes cross-examined by Colin Mandy, SC. So I'll give you Colin Mandy's reply and his questions of what he asked this particular witness. And Colin Mandy says, CH, you said you had never met Erin, is that right? And she says, correct. Not face to face. And she says, no. And then it says, in the 6 years or so that you have described, so the time period that she talked about in the previous questions, he asks, there were a handful of phone calls between you. She says, that's correct. And they say, they're just clarifying a handful of phone calls, and she says again that is correct, that they had spoken a handful of times on the phone. So Colin Mandy wants to talk about the group setting again, and he says, you said to the jury in the initial stages of your meeting, Erin, that you were part of a much larger group that was interested in the Kelly Lane case. Is that right? And she says, yes, that's correct. And they say that became a smaller group of around 20 to 30 people. And she replies, that's my memory of it, yes. And then they go on to say, and I've understood you to say that Erin was good at research. And we heard that before in the prosecution's questions. And she says, yes, sir. And they say, at the time when you were involved in the Kelly Lane group, they say, was that at the time when you were involved in the Kelly Lane group? And her reply is that this happened over the course of both groups, so a couple of those groups. And she replies, it depends on what topics were being discussed, but she was well known. Erin Patterson was well known as being able to find out information. There were always new cases that people discussed and always new things in the news that people wanted to find out about. She seemed to be able to find that information. Guys, be good in the chat, I swear to God. I swear to bacon. You guys will never eat bacon again if you're bad. Just let me check the chat. All right, everyone's being good boys and girls. Good. Be good in there. You're a protein bar. Someone's talking about protein bars in my house. What's going on? All right, let's get back to the notes from today. So they're talking about these groups, and they say that first group was quite large. That second group of about 20 to 30 people then became a group of a much smaller group. and they said, "What was the number of that group?" They give an example of around 7 to 8 or 15. Ah, yeah, so my notes here, they're asking about the second group of people. It was 20 to 30 people. Then they're asking, that group became a smaller group. So they're saying when it splintered off into an even smaller group. And she replies, that group was between 7 and 15, and the population changed and shifted. But she says, I wasn't in that particular group from the start, so that's why I'm unsure about the number of people. And they're asking her what year did that group start? And they say, so that group of people, the much smaller group, what year did that start off? In about 2020 question mark. And she says, I would say 2020 or 2021. Yeah, I'd say 2020 confident. So she's saying she believes it to be around 2020 that that group started. So they're asking her, that group was more of a social group, wasn't it? And she says, it was very social, but we still discuss, societal matters, but more so as friends. Uh, and they say the group of women would share things about each other's lives. And she says, correct. Current affairs type things, correct. Books, yes. Podcasts, yes. Cooking, correct. So all manner of things, and they say here also films, yes, general discussion and life issues, talking about everyone's children. She says yes, definitely, and seeking support when facing a difficult situation. Those sort of things, how you do with friends. So it became sort of like a support group, but they also talked about like daily things in their lives and whatever's happening in the news, that type of thing. And and they go on to ask a place where people could vent, so venting about various things going on in their lives, and and they say if that was needed by one of the members, and they say the witness replies, I would say yes, and they say it wasn't a constant group, was it? That is, the messaging wasn't every day, all day, every day. It was quite, and she replies, it was quite constant for some of the members of that group. It depended on what they were doing, what else they were doing. And she says, I hold a full time job, so it wasn't constant for me, but it was certainly was for some members of that group. And it says here, as I think you've said, you could be part of the group chat, but not necessarily paying attention to everything that was going on at the time. She replies, that's the case, yes. And they ask about Erin in particular, and they say, now Erin in particular shared lots of things about. Actually, I'm just going to hold on, guys. All right. So it says here, Erin in particular shared lots of things about her family, her children. And then they say, within that group, yes, she did, is the reply from the witness. Often posted stories about her children, yes. And photos, definitely. So just like any mum, I guess, would post photos of their kids and things like that. Proud achievements or, being, happy being a mum. It says here, would you agree that her life appeared to revolve around them being her children? And she says, most definitely. And she appeared to you to be an attentive and devoted mum. Oh, sorry, mother. Yes. So, to her knowledge, to her viewing of, their interactions in this group and in the chat, she appeared to be an attentive and devoted mother. Um, They talk about here about the evidence that she gave earlier on when the prosecution was asking questions. And Colin Mandy asks, "You gave some evidence about the picture that she painted in relation to her relationship with Simon, and you said that they had grown apart, and that's the impression she had given." She replies, "That was the impression she gave. They were living more separate lives, I think, living separately." They ask, "You don't remember any specific words that she used when describing her husband?" And she replies, "Controlling is the word, and coercive, as I've said, were the two words that I really do recall strongly that were used repeatedly." Um, I'm not gonna go into this bit as much. They sort of talk here about what is the word coercive and what does that really mean? And the witness replies that she may use the word abusive because that stems from the fact that coercion is an abuse, and that was her answer to Colin Mandy about like why are you using that word? And Colin Mandy says, "All right, it's certainly the case." I'm gonna jump that. I don't think that's really relevant to anything. Yeah, I'm just gonna jump that, but that's the explanation for that. They were trying to look at why the word abuse and coercive and where did that come from. So, guys, you can't mention anyone, even witnesses. You can't be like any like Um, yeah. So I'll take you a little bit further down. They say here, "You said in your evidence," so that was the questions earlier, "that you understood Erin to have been an atheist." The witness replies, "Yes, she has shared that on a number of occasions." And it's so Colomandy puts it to her that it's certainly the case that in the past she may have been an atheist. And then he says, "I'm going to suggest to you that she was talking to you in these groups. She believed in God and had held Christian beliefs." The reply from the witness is, "I think she was two-sided on that. I think that was she went to church is the impression I got from it because of the family. But she was saying to us publicly in that group that she didn't necessarily believe in God." And they said, they just asked her about that phrase, "didn't necessarily believe in God." And she replies, "No, she described herself as an atheist." Um, okay. There's just some bits I cut out, guys, because like it's just not relevant, and it's just court. I just don't want to give you the back and forward for like the court stuff. And they say, where did they ask her though, "Do you remember in the chat that they're asking her if in the chat did she say which church she was going to go to, or what church do they go to?" And they ask, "Do you remember that or not?" And the witness says, "I do not know." So she's saying, "I don't remember her mentioning any specific church or where she might have went." They say, "What she did," and they say, "I'm going to suggest, is express frustration with various aspects of her husband's religious beliefs." And the witness says, "Yes, she did." And that is the end of the evidence for CH. So that is witness one of today. Witness one of the afternoon session. Um, this is correct. Aussie Tad says Australia has super strict laws, so if media say one wrong one thing wrong, I can go to jail. You name a child, you name anyone, you name an SA survivor, you name, I don't know, pick like the 50 different things that there's under the act that you could do wrong, and you could be held in contempt of court. So that's why I got to be very, very careful. I got to be super careful with what I read. So when you hear me stop sometimes, it's not because I don't know what I'm saying. It's because I'm double checking with my notes and I'm double checking that I'm reading the right stuff. So, no, I'm just giving you an explanation of how it works. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm not even. So when I'm doing this, I can't even see you guys. When I'm reading on Word, Microsoft Word. I can't see the chat, I can't see you guys, I can't see whatever. All I can see is my notes, and I've got 2 sets of notes up. One is yeah, I've just got 2 up, and I double check between them all the time. Put up the banner so we know. Hey, Yuta, are you hold on, guys. I wanna moderate Yuta. Hold on. We don't have another moderator here, do we? Alright. Yuta, do you mind moderating a little bit? Hold on. I'm just gonna add can I add it from here? Oh, that's not what I wanna do. All right, guys, give me 1 sec. I just want to mod. Oh, you're at work. Okay. Well, just be good. Be good. Or Yuta will come back later and then she'll ban you. I don't know what she'll do. Did you send me an email? Did you, my friend? Okay. Yeah, Sean. Sean, are you here? Sean can do it. Oh, Moonlight's here. Hey, sweetheart. Thank you, my friend. I'll add Sean too, so you guys. All right, we should be back. Okay, sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure, you know, we had someone that could keep an eye on the chat while I was reading. All right, what is going on with my camera? Apparently, we don't have a camera all of a sudden. I'm glad we got through that first bit. What is going on, camera? Yes, yes. All right. Hey, we're back again. All right, there we go. Sean is also now a moderator. And we got my lovely friend Moonlight View is here too. Moonlight View will get you, I swear. She's a sweet lady, but she's one of the best moderators on earth. Hey, good to see you guys. Hey, Jess T, Joe Neal, the profiler. Hey, my friend. Hey, Potter. How's it going? Good to see you, Potter. Good to see you all. You don't get notified? We had the show booked for like 5 hours. We had it booked for since like 3 o'clock or something. It's been freaking ages. So it notification should have gone out for it. All right, how's everyone traveling? Everyone doing all right? Everyone keeping up? You guys know where we're at? So we just heard the testimony from witness 1 CH for day 5. So this happened in the afternoon. We had quite a long lunch break today. I think it was almost 2 hours. We had quite a long lunch, and then in the afternoon we heard from these 3 witnesses, and they each gave their testimony or evidence on the stand. We've been through number one, and we've got two more to go. I'm not going to cover the end of the cross examination of Simon Patterson. I think a lot of it has been done in the media in like over this morning, and not that I don't think it's important. I think it is. I think all of it's important. We should report all of it, but I've seen a ton of media about it already. So I think we'll go from after lunch today, and we'll give you the three witnesses. So we've heard from the first one. Let's go to number two. Now I'm going to call her DB. DB. And they're saying here, yep, let me scroll down. So they start by saying, I'm gonna ask you some questions today about your relationship with a person called Erin Patterson. Do you know her? And she says yes. And they said, how do you come to know her? And DB says she first popped up in one of my true crime chat groups online on Facebook. And they say, when was this? And the witness replies, I believe it was early 2019. And then they ask, about that Facebook group, how many members did it have? Was it, sorry, that's worded incorrectly. No. And that Facebook group had about 35 to 50 members. Is that your recollection? And DB says yes. And they say, and you were using a Facebook account to access this group? Yes. They ask her what her account name was, and she says, my account name was DB. And they say, over time, did the account names that Erin Patterson used, did the account name start off as Erin Patterson? And she says, that's right. And then they said, and later that name was Erin. She says, that's right. And then she says, later again, it was Erin. And she says, that's right. They say, in that first Facebook group, what sorts of discussions occurred in that group? And she replies, they were mostly about true crime issues, news, Kelly Lane podcasts, and things like that. Lots of people sharing different podcasts and news articles. So, like many different true crime groups that you may find on Facebook. And they say, okay, did that group eventually dissolve? And she says it did. And they say, in its place, a smaller group popped up at the end of 2019. Is that right? And they said, yes, that is correct. With about how many members? 7 or 8 members. And then she actually replies, her recollection is about 25 or so members, in between 20 and 25 members. And then they go on to say, okay, 20 to 25 members. Was that similar in terms of the discussions that took place in that group? And she says, pretty much. We just shared news articles and current affair, things like that, COVID topics and things like that. And he said, did that group eventually dissolve as well? And she replies, DB replies, people kept getting removed from the group. If they were inactive or not contributing, they were being removed. And then they say, so they ask her the next question. Eventually, a smaller group of about 7 or 8 members had been created. Is that right? And she says, not to my recollection. The final group that I was in with Erin and some of the other people, it was still about 18 to 20 members. And she says, before Erin left. No. It was still about 18 to 20 members before, yeah. And then she goes on to say, when Erin left that group, it had about 18 to 20 members, I believe. So 18 to 20 people. And they say, that obviously included you and Erin Patterson. And she says, yes. And she said, the next question says, do you recall the names of anyone else that was in that group? I am not going to read these out to you. I don't think that's fair to anyone. All I'll tell you is that she listed a bunch of people that were apparently in that group. And that's all I'm going to say. I don't think people's names need to be splashed all over everything. So, and they said that's fine. You don't have to name all of them. And they go on to ask, how active was Erin in this particular chat group? And she goes on to answer, and she says, for the first few years, she was quite active in the group. And they go on to say, she was quite active at the beginning, perhaps in the first couple of years, but in the last year or so, she barely posted in the group. And they said, when she was in the group and active, what sorts of things was she posting or sharing in there? And she answers, DB answers, it was more just commenting on news articles about certain cases. They go on to ask her, did Erin Patterson ever talk about her husband Simon and their relationship in this final smaller group? And then the DB, who's giving evidence, says no. She more spoke to him in a private group chat with me and a few others. And they say, okay, how many people were in this private chat group? About 5 of us. She posted things. So the next question is, so she posted things about Simon and their relationship in the smaller group. And she says that's correct. Yes. What sorts of things did she post about the relationship? And she goes on to say that's a question, by the way. What sorts of things did she post about their relationship? And the answer to that from DB is just sometimes about how sad she felt, about how she was just so religious and how it was difficult. And she says, to get along with Simon. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Just sometimes how sad she felt about how he was just so religious and how it was so difficult to get along with him. And she says some of it was to do with the way he treated, um, their kids. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to skip that rest of that testimony, guys. I don't want anything to do with any of the kids in this particular matter. They go on to say here, did she post things about what she thought of Simon or her perception of Simon? And she replies, DB replies, just that he wasn't a very nice person. And they say, okay. And they say, did she post anything about his ability to care for their children? And she says, yes and no. She was always, she was always wanting him to be involved with the kids' lives. So she was quite happy with him wanting to be regularly involved. But I think it had more to do with just his cleanliness and things like that she wasn't happy with. Then they ask her, what did she say about his cleanliness? And the answer, DB answers, she didn't want the kids to sleep over there at night because she wasn't happy with the way he lived. And the next question says, you mentioned previously that she said something about Simon's religion. What did she say about Simon's religion? And they say, I feel like sometimes she felt as though he put the church before her and his family. And yeah, let's drop down a little bit further. They say, at some stage, did Erin Patterson discuss a food dehydrator in this group chat? And she says, yes, she did. Yes. What did she say about that? And the answer is, she was a bit excited that she'd purchased a food dehydrator. They ask DB, Did she share any media about the food dehydrator? Any images? And the reply is in our private group chat. She shared photos of her dehydrating mushrooms in the food dehydrator. And they said, what did she say she was doing with that dehydrator? And she said, so what did she say she'd been using the dehydrator for? And apparently the answer from DB is just for mushrooms. So there you go. So they presented some images, and the images they ask if DB can see them, and they say yeah. So it's put up on the screen, and the description of it that DB says, it says, "Can you tell us what this is an image of?" And it says here, the reply from DB is, "It's a screenshot of a comment that Erin made about hiding powdered mushrooms in everything, mixing them into chocolate brownies, and that the kids had no idea." And they're just asking here, okay. They ask her, like, when is this message from? And she replies, "It was sometime after purchasing the food dehydrator, but I can't specifically remember when. It would have been sometime early to mid between when the lunches had occurred and a few months before that." They said sometime in between that. And they said they put up another image, and it said, they asked DB, "Can you read that for the jury?" And she said, and it says here, "So, fun fact, the dehydrator reduces mushroom mass by 90%. Do you think Woolies is Woolworths here in Australia? It's a supermarket. Do you think Woolies would mind if I brought the dehydrator into their vegetable section and dried things before I buy them?" Um, and they said, "Who do you understand this message to be sent by?" And the reply by DB is, "That is Erin." And they asked, "Do you know when this message was sent?" And she says, "Straight after that previous message that we read out before." And it says, they said, "You've described the time frame." And they said, "Of a few months before the lunch." And she says, "Yes, I believe so." The lunch you're referring to is the lunch after which Erin Patterson's family members passed away. Is that right? And she says, "Yes, that's the lunch. Yes." They said they put up another image, and they ask DB, "What is that?" And she replies, "That's Erin's food dehydrator. They're all the shells and the mushrooms that she was dehydrating." And they ask her, "How did you obtain this image?" And DB replies, "Erin sent it to us. She was excited about dehydrating mushrooms." Oh my God, my cat. Rory, get down. Hey, sorry, my cat's decided to be a jerk. Can you get it down, please? My cat's jumped up on the kitchen table. Naughty cat. And yeah, so what is that? She says that's Erin's food dehydrator. They're all the shelves and the mushrooms that she was dehydrating in the dehydrator. They said, "How did you obtain this image?" Erin sent it to us. She was excited about dehydrating mushrooms. They said, "I'm going to show another image now. Is this a similar image to the last one?" DB replies, "Yes, it is." "Also sent by Erin Patterson?" "Yes." They say, "What does that image depict?" And the reply from DB is, "One of the trays and one of the shells from the dehydrator with mushrooms on there." And they said they're going to show one more image. "Can you tell us what this is?" And she says, "It looks just like buttered mushrooms that are chopped up." And they said, "How did you obtain this?" And they said, "Erin sent that to us as well in the same thread of messages." And they said, when were these messages sent to that group? Again, she replies, sorry, DB replies again, it would have been around the same time as the previous messages that we read when she was excited about buying her food dehydrator. So there you go. Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to get my notes back in order. All right. All right, give me a sec, guys. I just have to flick over to another one of my Word documents. That wasn't Muffin, that was Rory. Rory's the one who jumps up on the benches. Hold on. All right, shall we continue? Shall we keep going? All right. All right. All right. So in this particular stage of questioning, this is still with Miss Lenthal, Miss Lenthal. Heard her name like 50 times today and I can't remember. Good work, Ping. Miss Lenthal. There we go. She is for the prosecution and she continues her questioning and she says, DB, did you discuss cooking in that group chat? And DB replies, all the time. That was one of our main topics. So they obviously liked cooking and liked talking with each other about it. I think a lot of people do that. And in particular, did you discuss beef Wellington or preparing beef Wellington at any stage? And DB replies, Erin asked a question in the group asking if anyone had ever cooked a beef Wellington before and if they had any advice. And they ask, when was this message? And DB replies, I believe it was 2 weeks before the lunch. And they ask, did anyone else reply? And she said, several other members of the group also replied. I'm not going to name them. I don't think that's a good idea. Okay. They say, okay, after that date, was there any further conversations in the group about the beef Wellington? And DB replies, I believe a couple of days after that conversation, Erin was out looking for a cut of meat for the beef Wellington. And they ask her, how do you know she was doing that? And they say, Erin was at the shops. I think she sent through a photo asking if this one is okay. And they say, she was struggling to find a big piece of meat for a beef Wellington at a butcher's. And they said, Erin said it was really expensive, like to buy the meat. So that was probably the last time we heard about the beef Wellington. And they ask, when was that? Can you recall? And they say it was towards the end of July. And they ask, did you know? Do you know? Wait, hold on. Did Erin tell you why she was cooking the beef Wellington? She says, no, we just all assumed it was for her and her children. And they say, okay, now at some stage later, you became aware that Erin's relatives had passed away. And she says, I did, yes. They say, did you ever meet Erin in person? She says, no. Have you ever spoken to her? And she says, no. I did hear her voice because she was in a video call, but I didn't really speak to her. And that's it. Let me just check how much we got to go. Okay. So you kind of see the questioning. The questions are very similar for each witness. They ask about the group, how big it was, the different stages of the group, and the content that they shared. They ask that between each one, and that's it. Like it's, we keep going. And they say here, so now after Miss Lenthal asked her questions for the prosecution, DB now gets cross-examined by Colin Mandy, SC, and they say, "So you've never met Erin in person, DB? Is that correct?" And she said, "No, that's right." And Colin Mandy, SC says, "The way I understood your evidence, there were 4 group chats that you were involved in. There was a big one, then it reduced to a smaller one of 20 or 30, and then it reduced to 15, and then it reduced to 5." And they said, "Is that correct?" And then they say, "The one that was reduced to 5 was a private, like through Messenger. That one was 18. Is the one with 18 or 20 people, that one is still going. There's people still in that group." And she says, "I'm not in there anymore. I left." So she's saying that the other groups, like the large one, the 2000, then it got smaller, 20 or so, and then there was an even smaller one that had like 5 people. She's saying like the really small one was through like Messenger. It was like a group chat rather than a Facebook group. And I think that's what they were trying to get to there. In relation to the small group, they say the group of 5 people, that was a group who would share things about each other's lives. And she says, "Yep." And they say day-to-day things, current events, that's right. And she says, "That's right." And they say, it was a place where people could vent about various things going on in their lives. She says, "Yep, yeah." They were, and she says, they were being supported by other women who were part of the group. And she says, "Yeah, that's right." Uh, they said, "Erin shared a lot about her children, didn't she?" And the reply from her is, "Yes, she did." Uh, and they ask her, "To your observation, did it appear? Did it appear? That's not the right way to word it. Uh, and to your observation, appeared to revolve. They're asking her life, did it appear to revolve around her children?" And she said, "Absolutely, it did. That's all she really cared about in life, I think." So they're just asking if from what this woman saw, did Erin's life revolve around her children? And she says, "Absolutely, it did. That's all she really cared about in life, I think." And they said, "It was clear to you that she was an attentive and devoted mother." And she said, "Yeah, I thought she was a wonderful mother." Um, they ask the next question and they say, "It was a supportive environment, this group of yours." And she says it was very supportive. And they said, "You told the jury there were discussions about cooking in the group." And she says, "Yes, many times there were many discussions." And they go on to ask about, they say members of the group owned the Recipe Tin Eats cookbook. Ping can't tell you what that is, but I can say, okay, it must be a cookbook. And it says, they said many members of the group, this is her answer, but I'll tell you sort of where it goes. It said a number of members of the group own the Recipe Tin Eats cookbook. And she said, we were also a part of the Recipe Tin Eats Facebook group as well as a few other groups, yes. And she says, "You bought a copy of that book for your mother-in-law?" She says, "Yes, and for myself and for a few other people." And they'd be so true. They go on to ask her about discussions before the lunch in July about beef Wellington. And they ask her, had there been any of those discussions long before July? And she says, I don't recall. She says, I only remember the particular discussions in July. I don't recall any others. She says, they ask, Colin Mandy asks, was that a dish that was loved by other members of that group? And she says, yes, it was, yes. And they said other members of that group had prepared that meal before. And she said they had, yep. And Erin had shared with that group that she decided to cook it at the end of July. Sorry, she decided to cook it in July of 2023. And she says that's right. And she had asked members of this group for tips on cooking that recipe. She says she did. Okay. They say, and that included whether or not substituting different cuts of meat would be all right. And she says, I don't recall that conversation. But she says, I think when she was out looking for a different cut of meat, I think that's when it came up. And that the next question is, she had told members of this group at various times that she loved mushrooms. And she says, yeah, that's right. Yes. Um, and they said, and you knew about that from early on. And she says, I always knew that about her. They say, when you were asked about when Erin asked about substituting a different cut of meat, do you remember whether she sent a photo of an eye fillet steaks to the group? And DB's replies, I can't remember if there were pictures or if it was a conversation, but I don't remember. So she's saying she doesn't specifically remember anything about that. They just confirm that that Erin loved mushrooms and that she had shared that with the group, and that she had a dehydrator, and DB says that's right, and that she had sent photos openly to the group showing her dehydrating mushrooms in the dehydrator, and DB says she did, and that was common knowledge within that group, and DB says it was, and that Colin Mandy says you gave some evidence about her having issues with Simon Patterson's cleanliness, and she says yes. Uh, they said as part of those discussions that she told. Wait, hold on. They said, did she tell you as part of that discussion that she'd been to his home to clean it in that period? And she said, yes. She reluctantly told us that. So that was the end of that evidence for DB. All right. All right. I'm gonna scroll up. Potter says that is currently a massive. Okay, Oh, is that those muffin girls? Those girls that are like, you stole my recipe or something like that, and one girl's like, you stole my caramel slice or something. Yeah, I saw that on the news or something. I don't know much about it though. I have no idea. Maybe we'll find out in testimony. I'm not sure. Not sure, but the testimony says that Erin loved them. But other than that, I don't know. I'm just having a look up through the chat, make sure everything is kosher. Don't want getting called in front of the justice in the morning to be sent to jail. I really don't want that. All right. I need a drink. Hold on, guys. It's a lot of reading. Hold on. All right. All right, let me get my notes up from today again. All right, where's this third bit? I think my fingers may start to get like biceps at this point. I've never typed so much in my life. Um, Doing these court cases, I underestimated how much typing I would need to do. I don't know what I thought, but going into this, I I I may be a faster typer than I used to be. You have to be very quick, and you have to be very proficient with Word, very fast. Um, yeah, I did not expect that, so it's taking me takes me right all day. We have to type all day basically. We get 1 hour break. All right, all right. Last witness for the afternoon. I'm not gonna. All right, I'm not gonna go through all of it. I think maybe we're getting a little too detailed at times. Here we go. So this is a witness I'm going to call JH, and the questioner on this is prosecution, Miss Lenthal. And let's get down here. So they ask this particular witness, JH. They said, "How did you come to know Erin?" And her reply was, "Originally through a Facebook group that was about Kelly Lane, that stemmed from an ABC documentary that was on about Kelly Lane. It was a pretty big group. Eventually, that fell apart, and I was in another group with about 20 other people that came from that bigger group. And Erin was one of them. And then five of us were in a private chat together. And that started at the beginning of 2020. And they talk about what was the focus of the smaller group. Sorry, let me rephrase it. What was the focus of that smaller private chat? And her reply, JH's reply, is that I think we'd just become closer friends and wanted to have a group that was just ours. It was the beginning of COVID, so there was lots to talk about COVID. It was just day to day, our families, friends, current events, whatever was going on in our lives, and we were quite open with each other. And they ask this witness, what was Erin's Facebook profile name when you first came to know her? Her reply was Erin Patterson, and then they say in mid 2020 did it change? And she did it change to Erin, and she says that's correct, or sorry, that's right. And in September 2021, it changed to Erin. Is that right? And she says that sounds right. Yes. They asked that. I'm not going to do that one. They say, in this small group chat that you mentioned, did you ever discuss mushrooms? And she says, yes. And they say, in particular, did Erin talk about mushrooms in that group? And she says, her reply to Miss Lenthal, I can't remember if there was very much talk early on, although we did talk about recipes and things like that. Around February to March 2023, Erin had bought a dehydrator and was particularly uh, Erin had bought a dehydrator and seemed to be using it to dehydrate mushrooms. Did she describe what she did with those mushrooms? And JH replies, I remember her making mushroom soup. I remember her talking about blitzing to make a powder to put in things so the kids would eat it. Particularly, I think one of the children didn't like mushrooms, so she seemed to use them a lot. There were a couple of things I do remember. They were a couple of things I remember. And they say, as part of the discussions, did she send any photographs to the group? And JH's reply is, yeah, she sent a photo of the dehydrator with mushrooms in it. And they said, did Erin ever discuss foraging for mushrooms? And she says no. Was there ever discussions in this group around cooking or preparing food? And she said, her reply is, JH, lots of discussions about cooking and preparing food. And they say, was there a discussion about preparing beef Wellingtons? She says, yes. Towards the end of July, she messaged, Erin told us she was making a beef Wellington. She messaged us. I think she was at a supermarket and she messaged something about beef that she was buying because she was making beef Wellington. Um, they said here the first time you heard about the deaths of Don and Gail Patterson and Heather Wilkinson was on the Sunday, the 6th of August. Is that right? And she says, that's right. And I heard it via the news. And they ask JH, did you have direct contact with Erin Patterson after that? And she says, Erin emailed on the Monday morning via my work email and asked for me to call her. I tried to call her. I think she called me. I don't think she answered. I think she called me back, but I ended up speaking with her over the phone. Yes. During that call with her, did she tell you, did she talk about where the mushrooms had come from that she had used in the beef Wellington? JH's reply is, yes, she said they came from an Asian grocer. And they ask, did she talk about being sick? Herself being sick? And she says, JH says, yes. She said she was sick and in hospital. And they ask, what about the children consuming the meal? And she says, yes. She said they ate some of the meal and they were checked out at a hospital. And they say, they're talking about how long the call lasted here. And they ask, the call lasted about 10 minutes. Is that right? She says, yes. She had a lawyer calling her while we were on the call, so she hung up. And that is the end of the prosecution's questions for that particular witness. Julie Miller says, hi, thank you all for welcoming me. I'm in the West. I really appreciate this channel and its good behavior. I appreciate your good behavior because if you don't behave, Ping goes to jail. So please behave. I don't really like jail. I'm too pretty for jail. I'm far too pretty. I look way younger than 40. I can't go to jail. I wouldn't survive in there. I wouldn't have enough hair care products to keep me going. My hair would be all frizzy. I wouldn't be able to do it. All right. Let's get back to the topic. So be good in the chat. Be good. All right. So we're in the final stretch, everyone. We're in the final stretch for day 5. Day 5's almost in the books here. Let me head to Colin Mandy for the cross-examination. Colin Mandy says, ask JH, you've never met Erin Patterson in person, is that right? And JH says, that is correct. That's right. And they say, this group, the small private group that you talked about that started, I think you said it was at the beginning of COVID. Yes. And the reply from JH is yes, the beginning of February 2020. And Colomandi says, all right. During that time in Victoria, there were a lot of lockdowns. And JH says, yes, that's right. That's right. Yes. Sorry. my dyslexia is getting me tonight. They say a lot of the discussion in the group was from people if they were in Victoria who might have been locked down. And JH says yes, yep. And me in Tasmania are still worried about the whole thing. And they ask, so the group had transformed. It was really a social space, wasn't it, for the five of you? And JH says yes, very much so. Kyle and Mandy asks, you would share about each other's lives, and she says yes. Day-to-day activities, yes. Colin Mandy then proceeds to ask about sometimes you would come in and out of the chat depending on what was going on in your life, and she replies, she answers that question, yes, that's right. And they ask about current events, and she says yes. And Colin Mandy says it was a supportive space where five of you supported each other. Is that right? She says very much so. Yes. And here it says, and Erin shared lots of things about her children with the group. She replies yes. JH replies yes. Colin Mandy asks, did you understand her to be a full-time mum at the time? JH replies, yes, I did. Colin Mandy then says, is it fair to say that her life seemed to revolve around her children? And JH replies, yes. And asks about Erin being an attentive and devoted mother. JH replies, yes. And Colin Mandy says, I think you've confirmed she had shared with the group her love of mushrooms. JH says, yes, she seemed to really like them. Yes, she seemed to really like mushrooms. Colin Mandy continues and says, do you remember the discussion about the beef Wellington at the beef Wellington in July of 2023? He goes on to say, do you remember the fact of the discussion? You wouldn't now remember the details of it. And JH says, I remember some of it, yeah. Colin Mandy says there was a discussion about cooking beef Wellington. Erin was asking for advice from members of the group as to how to prepare it. And she says yes. They said, and she says here, JH says, yeah, I remember her saying, how do I make sure it's not soggy? And I said, you just make sure you wrap the pastry as close to putting it in the oven as possible, and that will help stop it being soggy. I've only ever made it once or twice, but that's what I remembered. And Colin Mendy says, is it one of your favorite dishes? JH replies, it is, yes. And Colin Mandy SC says, a dish that was appreciated by other members of the group. JH says, some of them, yes. I remember one member said she would definitely never eat it. So one member did not like it. And they say, Colin Mendy says, did she suggest a tofu Wellington instead? JH says, yes, she did. That's it. That's it for tonight. That was the three witnesses in the afternoon. Now I've cut out things and I've just kind of like compressed it a little bit, but the facts should be still true to what I heard in court throughout the day, and they're true to my notes. So I hope I'm doing a good job. That's all I ever want to do. I just want to do a good job. So I hope I'm doing that. All right. That's it. That's day 5 in the books. I'm not going to do Simon Patterson's end of his cross exam. There's enough information out there, I believe, that where you could find that information. It was updated really quickly this morning. A lot of other places, but yeah, Potter, what are you doing? Yeah, and No, we can't do that. Sorry, Potter. Subjudice laws will come and get us. Let me just. That's right. Ping is too pretty for jail. That's right. I'm far too pretty. Don't take me to jail. Please don't. Yeah, I don't. Potter, it doesn't work like that though. I can't put your comment on the screen, but the way it actually works, and I can tell you that I've spoken to the Supreme Court about this and I've read their media guide on this particular subject. I personally am responsible for your opinions while the trial is ongoing. That's why there's no comments under this video. That's why there's no live chat replay. That's why the live chat I can't turn off for some reason in the when I'm live. That's why I ask you all to be very careful because yeah, apparently I am responsible for your opinion. Doesn't matter what you say. If you subjudice the trial, I'm responsible, not you, because it's my platform. Because it's my YouTube channel, apparently I get held responsible for your comments. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense, but apparently that's the way it works. So yeah, I don't know why it's like that here, but that's what we've been told. That's what we've been told is that the owner of the channel or website is responsible for what people post. So yeah, I already deleted it. It's all right. It's all right. The rest of your stuff's fine. It was just that one. Yeah. Hi, Woman of Steel. How are you? Sean says, Ping has been going to the trial in Morwell if you're new here. Yeah. So we were out in Morwell and it was nice to see the city. So all right, I'm gonna end this particular stream, but I'm gonna open up another one. Okay. I'll see you later. I'll see you in about 5 minutes. All right, bye.